Welcome to the daily briefing from interest.co.nz. I'm Bernard Hickey, filling in for David Chaston. Today, we look at the Reserve Bank's decision to keep the official interest rate on hold at 8.25% and at what Reserve Bank Governor Bollard is saying about the future for interest rates and the economy. We'll also look at a specific warning he's made about the inflationary effects of the government's planned carbon emissions trading scheme. Now, as expected this morning, the central bank left the official cash rate unchanged at 8.25%. But Governor Bollard warned that inflationary pressures have increased. He gave no clear indication of where interest rates would go next, but his commentary was dominated by the risks of higher inflation because of the commodity price boom, and in particular, the consistently high price of oil. He also warned that the prospect of tax cuts as early as 2009 has added fuel to the inflationary outlook. Now, some economists still expect the Reserve Bank will have to raise interest rates next year, a move that would certainly concentrate political minds on the effects of higher mortgage rates in a volatile electorate. Remember, in Australia just last month, it was the Reserve Bank's decision to increase interest rates just weeks before the election that sealed the fate of Australian Prime Minister John Howard. That's despite record low unemployment and strong economic growth. In our Reserve Bank Governor's words, overall inflationary pressures have increased and interest rates are now likely to remain around current levels for longer than previously thought. Now, he's certainly left himself room to move, and if anything, he is now more concerned about inflation than he was before. The irony is, of course, that at the same time the Reserve Bank is forecasting higher inflation, it's also forecasting a slowing of economic growth to 2.5% from 3%. Now let's look a little deeper at the economic projections that have come with the Reserve Bank's latest decision on interest rates and its quarterly monetary policy statement. The central bank is now actually projecting that inflation will rise above the 1 to 3% band it targets over the medium term. Now that's largely because oil prices are about 30% higher than the Reserve Bank had forecast in its last monetary policy statement in September. But there are other inflationary pressures at work here too. The New Zealand economy is about to receive a big injection of dairy cash. The Reserve Bank is forecasting total gross domestic income will rise by 6.5% just from the higher dairy payout alone. It sees this rippling out through the provinces and into the cities from dairying areas such as the Waikato, Taranaki, South Canterbury and Southland. Bollard has warned again about the inflationary effects of high wage growth because of a tight labour market and the government's heavy spending programs. Interestingly, the Reserve Bank has also, for the first time, tried to work out what income tax cuts in 2009 might do to the economy. Now that both Labour and National have indicated they will cut taxes after the elections next year, the Reserve Bank is assuming there will be cuts worth around $1.5 billion. However, these tax cuts aren't enough to keep the economy growing fast. The Reserve Bank sees GDP growth falling to 2.5% from 3%. Now that's because of the higher oil prices, the higher currency and higher interest rates. It also points to a sharply slowing housing market as a factor suppressing the economy. This is partly because of higher interest rates, but a drop in net migration is also dragging on the housing sector. That's as much because of the outflow of New Zealanders to Australia as it is about a drop in migration from Asia in particular. So overall, the bank is forecasting higher inflation and lower economic growth. Back in the 1970s, they used to call that stagflation. Now, one unusual feature of this December monetary policy statement was the Reserve Bank's comments about the inflationary impact of the government's emissions trading scheme announced in September. Now, the Reserve Bank hasn't included its initial estimates in its official projection for inflation, but it has warned that the scheme could add about 0.33% to the inflation rate in 2009 and 2010. Here's how the scheme would increase prices. New Zealand is currently emitting around 25% more greenhouse gas emissions than it was in 1990. We've agreed, of course, under the Kyoto Protocol to reduce our emissions to those 1990 levels by the so-called commitment period, which lasts from 2008 to 2012. If we can't, then we'll have to buy credits on the international markets. Initially, the government will do that for net emitters, but that help will be phased out for most industries from 2008 through to 2013, and they'll have to buy them themselves. Now, the Reserve Bank reckons emitters will have to buy credits that they will pass on in higher prices. The bank forecasts fuel prices will rise 4% from January 2009, and electricity prices will rise 7% from 2010. This is the main cause of the damage to the inflation outlook from the scheme, although the Reserve Bank also warns of second-round effects as other retailers and manufacturers see the increases in fuel and power prices as permanent and pass them through in higher prices. In conclusion, the Reserve Bank said if these forecasts are right and prices do rise, then the bank will have no choice but to, quote, lean against this inflationary pressure with higher interest rates. So, what's good for the planet may not be good for your mortgage.